My name is Henny van Dijk, and I came to the medical school in October of 1972 as supervisor of photography and motion pictures in the department. At that time we had a department of biomedical communications. Malcolm Skolnick was the chair of that department, and the interesting challenge was that at the time there was no medical school. The only actual building that the medical school had was the Freeman building, because that was dedicated in October of '72 when I came in that same month by George Bush, who was then, I can't remember what he was, but he was an ambassador to China, I think. So he was doing the dedication of the building. I came from Duke University and was called if I was interested in starting a whole new department. And so I was very interested in that. I think that's one of the things that you always like to aspire to start something from the bottom up. When I came here, however, I noticed how interesting the place was shaped, because I had a mobile home that was for patient picture taking. The pathology things were done there, and the black and white darkroom was there. So, and that was between the Robertson Pavilion here to the and the original 1925 Herman Hospital building. So then my group and the administrative part and the motion picture area was in the Herman Professional building on the 6th floor. And my color development area was in the garage. And finally, the television group was in the Freeman building. That was the only one who actually had access. So Malcolm Skolnick and the graphics people were in Center Pavilion Hospital, which is no longer there. As a matter of fact, all of it is no longer there. Even the Freeman building is gone. So that was kind of an interesting start of everything. But ever since that time, I truly enjoyed being part of that media group. I don't know if it was Malcolm or the Dean, Smythe at the time, who had the idea of having the Learning Resource Center as the central idea for media. So anything that we would shoot of patients would go, one would go to the doctor, the other one would go to the Learning Resource Center. Well, that lasted about a week and a half, because the physicians were not in favor of that. They really, truly wanted to have their own thing, and if they want to share it, then that would happen that way. So of those people that were originally there, I think only Kareem Marani is still there. He was in the Learning Resource Center, and so that was happened. Then my first interesting start was when we were ready to go to this building. We had the first flood, and so the first flood was I was on the 6th floor of the Herman Professional building looking out, and I saw this car driving by. I mean, not driving, I mean. So I said, what the heck is going on? I had no idea that it was flooding. So then the lights went out, and we had to go, with lanterns and whatever, down the stairs from 6 floors up to McGregor, that was the name of the street at the time, McGregor. So when I came out of the building onto Fannin, I was immediately about ankle deep in water. And I said, uh-oh, this is a problem. So Don, my first photographer, and I walked over to the emergency center at Herman, but at that time was below level. And so I looked at there, and I saw this vague red glow. Those were the ambulances. I mean, they still were going, but they were underwater. So that was the first thing. And then there are pictures of students cleaning up the cadaver things and so on. And so after that, the anatomy department and the anatomy things for the students went to the Prudential building, in the ballroom of the Prudential building. And they had a big curtain in, so on the one hand you had lectures, on the other hand you had anatomy. And it was kind of interesting because years later you would still the smell of the formaldehyde of the whatever they did, you know. So it was interesting. So, but after that we moved, and of course all our equipment that we had purchased for going into the new building was in the basement and gone. So that was the first time I lost everything that we had, and we had some really top equipment because at that time we were still doing 16 millimeter film, and so we had an Aeroflex BL, which at the time was the top of the line thing. We had 4x5 cameras for photography and so on. We had Hasselblads, we had Nikon, we had really top of the line stuff. So that was kind of neat. Then in the 80s, this would go. I think we moved into the building in '78, if I'm not mistaken. So and we had virtually the whole side of this thing, because we had the television, the 2-story television studio. We had the Learning Resource Center right next door, and then we started to the corner. So we had a large amount of territory, so to speak. But it was also like prime territory. So the amount of rebuilding our group did under Beaubien and me was legendary by the people that do the stuff like that. So that was kind of fun, and we had a really interesting group of kids. I call them kids because they were all either just out of college or something like that, and they were dying to get into the field. And I always liked that because not only were they good, but they also were very inventive in some areas. So that was always pretty nice. For them it was an eye-opener if they had to go to surgery or do burn patients or something like that. That's stuff on your psyche. Sometimes it was quite interesting. I had one photographer who was pregnant at the time, and at the time it was like very popular to do diazo things. Well, diazo is an ammonia process, so you would do the actual exposure and then develop it into these ammonium jars, you know. And she gave me a hard time that you know, she was not going to do that because she was pregnant. And so I finally gave in because I wasn't really sure if it was harmful or not. So I said, okay, you don't have to do that. But in general, we had a fun time. The group was really pretty interesting, especially around this time with Mardi Gras or the rodeo. They did nice stuff. One of the things that I was in charge of was also the photography of the patients in the Shriners Hospital. That was right next door to Herman, and so when I discovered that they had a circus every year come to town, and I discovered that the kids could not go there, and I said, now that is weird. You know, you have Shriners Circus and they can't go. So I got my sound man and my filmmaker and my photographers to go to the circus, photograph all that, and then had at that time a 3 or 4 projector slideshow for the kids to see what the circus was like. And so that was always a fun thing. But ultimately they moved to their own stuff in down Maine, and got some prime territory there. Really a beautiful place, but it was too far for us to keep on going over there. So they started using video more instead of film, and the photography thing, of course, was, you know, something. The really, and I'm not sure that you would not have that similar to what I had. The main thing of our group was once we were in this building, that we were the largest group, media group or graphics group. And so therefore, I get involved with almost every president that I can, every dean, so or people in the departments, and especially in the early stages, the department chairs lasted not very long. They were leaving pretty quick. I know Van Pienen left. He was the pathology chair. I think he left after about a year or so. But others were gone pretty quickly too. So it was interesting to see how that developed in terms of longevity, in terms of programs, because originally the medical school was a 3-year program, not 4 years. So it was 3 years, and so the first graduating class in '73 went to the Simmons Auditorium here to get the picture taken, and now, when you do it now, you do it out in the open. It's a really classy way of doing a group picture. It really is. So I think Esther and I originally started that, and Dwight really took over and went into that thing very, climbing up there is fun, So anyhow, in '73 there was the groundbreaking of the medical school. And so at the time, Dean Smythe had some kind of thunderbolt accident that went through him into his foot. And so he was, if you see the picture of the groundbreaking, he stands there with his feet in gauze and whatever. So it was interesting, but that also started my idea of doing aerials every other year. So that was my first aerial, and it acquired slides, negatives, and film. So I had to do all those 3 things at the time, but it was fun. And as a matter of fact, that footage, Greg West and his crew in UTTV used it in their things all the time. So it was kind of cool. The other advantage I had was that in an academic institution, especially research, was something that you would be at the forefront of, either in a publication that you had to illustrate, or a test that you had to film. And so the last time I used my 16mm camera was when Lens Gould was presenting in Monaco. And so Monaco was on the European system, and so he couldn't use videotape. So we did it in 16mm, but that was the large project that we did on film. And now I think the thing is gone too. The whole building in front of the medical school, I think they tore that down, or are on the verge of tearing it down. So when I look at my 33 years, I started basically with at least one part of the team in the Freeman building, and then when I left, they tore the Freeman building down. And now there is a very nice 5 or 6 story thing on top of that. But it was the Freeman building that was the cause of the first flood, because there used to be like a ditch going from Brace Bio to another Brace Bio or something, And so it ran through. If you see pictures that from the 50s, there was a little bridge between the library and Baylor. And so that bridge was over the ditch. And they never took enough culverts to absorb that kind of water. And so it was interesting. So in '79, I think it was Dean Nobile, but it might have been Tuttle still, who basically separated out the academic part of the biomedical communications and the service part of biomedical communications. And so they hired a new director, Bob Beaubien. He was originally at Baylor, but then went to NPL and got in. And there's a picture of the 5 of us, with Laurie Reingold from television, Ted Jones for audiovisual, Phyllis for graphics, and me. And so that's also when we changed the name. We were no longer Biomedical Communications, we were Media Productions now. And I can't remember when we changed that to Graphic Communications, but we did, at some point. So all the things that I experienced, the two things that I never really truly believed in would happen. The first thing was that video would totally supplant film, totally. And well, it was really well done, and editing became a lot easier than cut and splice. So when I finally succumbed to video, and we did a lot of video on surgeries and things like that. The second one was the digital revolution. I still could not believe that the images that I saw in digital were even remotely close to the images we could get on film. So, but at some point we had one project that meant that we had to photograph all the faculty members in the school, and that almost has written digital all over it, So that's when we got the cameras and so on and so forth. So it was kind of interesting, and then I fell in love with it because the idea that you can actually scan something into a digital format and store it somewhere without having to have beaucoup folders and things like that. And it became very clear in 2001 when we had the second major disaster, and that was a much bigger disaster than the first one. Because that one, I was in Holland at the time, so I got called and I say, come on back up, your place has drowned. And so I got here, and it was about the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life, because the water came to about 1.5 feet on the ground floor. So you can imagine what it looked like in the catacombs, so to speak. And a lot of people lost a lot of their work in that flood. That was the time that I realized how much the faculty depended on the media services, and how much grief it would be, because my first thing was going to the dental branch, because I knew John O'Black, and he had space for us, and so we went there. But we found out very quickly that it's interesting, but nobody would go there from the medical school. It was too long or whatever. So then I talked to Dr. Ruiz, who had influence both in the medical school and in the Herman hospital, because at the time it was already Memorial Herman. So that was the one I talked to, and he said there is no space in Herman, but let me see what I can do. So ultimately he and Freddie Bleeker got us a research lab, and that were like 2 spaces. So I could put the administrative part in the smaller room, and in the larger room I could do 8 people with the big printer, because that was one of the money makers for us to do that. And that was one of the things that I probably will regret till ever. That is that you had to be self-supporting, and a self-supporting service organization in an academic center is, in my opinion, a major mistake, because now you become the enemy of your academic colleagues, and that's not what you have in mind. What you have in mind was supporting them with stuff. So that really was, in my opinion, the reason I felt like this is time to retire after 33 years. But we got back, and you know that. We got back in 2005, I think May or so, something like that. I was going to retire in August, so I was just in time to at least see how the group would function, and I was very pleased that we got all that space back. So that was pretty nice. But at the same time, it's still the case, although you have grown a bit as an office and as a department. We went from, at the high time of our existence, of 34 people to, when I left, 8. So it was an interesting shrinkage, if you want. So we were on Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers, whatever we were on, but we got all shrunk up. So when I retired, one of the things that I always said was interesting was that you will tell the people you have worked with, for Esther, for instance, or Phyllis, I worked with for more than 25 years, and so I used to joke about that. I said I've worked with you longer than many marriages last. So at the time you would say, we stay connected, we stay in contact, we will stay in touch. Well, then you find out very quickly that life gets in the way, and you don't. So at that moment, at that precise moment, it was 2 years after I retired, Catherine Thatcher and trying to remember the other person was, they came to me and say, we need you. I was a member of Youthro, of the retiree group, but I had not done anything in it. So she said, okay, we need you. And I said, for what? I said, well, we have this newsletter that we don't have anybody doing that. So since 2007, I've been doing the newsletter for the, called the Evergreen, for the UT Houston retirees, and because of the context that I used to have, I was very happy to recruit people for that thing. So the latest one is George Stencil. So those are the people that I knew from '72. George and Anna called them the pioneers, and we had a special retirement party for Dean Smythe when he retired, before his official retirement in November. So they were called the pioneers. And Brian Boutwell did a magnificent job of highlighting my career, more or less, and so did Herb Fred, who became a very close friend of mine, and we even published a book together based solely on his patients. But he insisted that because I did so much on the layout and the imagery and the grammar checking and things like that, that he considered it our book. And anytime I was talking to him about his book, he would say, time out, it's our book. So when you Google that on the web, you will find the book of memorable cases, and so it was a fun thing. And I was very proud of the fact that he was a person who had been in academia and teaching since the mid to late 50s, and so all his stuff was on slides, even the old Polaroid things, the ones that were like 3x4 Polaroid plastic stuff, and to drag him into the digital age with scanning and X-rays and whatever it was, and that was really something that I was pretty proud of, that you could even educate old dogs into new tricks, so to speak, and that was really pretty nice.